Average Rules is the 24th and final episode of the first season of The Middle. This is directed by Wendey Stanzler, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I talk about the episode and share some thoughts. And before I go any further, I just want to celebrate the fact that Betty White is in this episode. Really happy with that. And we have three main parts of the narrative, so I'll talk about those all in turn. And it's the end of the school year. And Axel has taken a test that shows he's academically gifted but performing below his potential, which I think comes as a surprise to everybody. And we have this really lovely scene where Mike is helping him study, and Mike actually says he's proud of him, which doesn't happen that often. Mike doesn't usually show his feelings very much, and Axel doesn't do that many things that people would be proud of. With his sports, with his athletics, absolutely, but in terms of studying, academics, not at all. So it was a rather beautiful moment. And despite the studying, Axel didn't do very well on his test. And Brick is the one who works out what happened. Because Axel mentioned that a kid who sits behind him, who usually does really well, did really poorly on that test, on the previous test. And Brick realises that their names are very similar and the scores were mixed up. So he's not academically gifted but performing below his potential. But his part of the narrative finishes really beautifully. And it turns out he did actually study, and maybe he did realise that he does actually have potential if he puts the work in. And he ended up getting a B- on his next test. And I thought that was really lovely because I think it made sense when they realised the test scores got mixed up. I think it would be a little bit out of character for us to suddenly realise Axel was brilliantly gifted academically. So it made sense that they'd rein that back in and stay true to his character. But then also, by giving him the chance to study and apply himself to show that actually he's not just a D student, he is actually capable of more, I thought was really lovely and a really nice way to conclude Axel's part of the story. I'll finish up with Sue in a moment, but first we have Brick and Betty White. Brick may not be allowed to move up to the 3rd grade because he has a couple of overdue library books. And he goes to the school library where he talks to the librarian, who is of course played by Betty White, and she explains he has 31 library books that he hasn't returned. I don't even know why he's allowed to take that many books, and I can't remember what it was at my school, but I really don't think we would have been allowed to take out 31. But Brick goes around the house, finds books in strange places, returns them all, apart from one. And the librarian explains that it's an atlas, a very expensive book, and he has to find it or he'll be stuck in the 2nd grade. Betty White whispering 2nd grade to herself was fantastic, sinister, very well done. Brick's solution? He checked out the same book from the public library and brought that to school instead. So not really solving the problem, but at least he gets to graduate to the 3rd grade. And having Betty White in this was just an absolute delight. Then we have Sue. And while the episode is all about the 3 kids, it is also about the parents, because it's all about their parenting and how they perceive their own parenting styles. So I like the fact that everybody's kind of involved here. And Sue's actually got really emotional. For Sue, it starts off with her getting the yearbook, and she's not in the class photo despite taking it 3 times. Or did she say she retook it 3 times, therefore taking it 4? I can't remember, but she took it a few times and there was still no photo available. But in Sue fashion, she's cool with it because she thinks that one of the candid cafeteria shots had a picture of her shoe in it. And Frankie said something that's actually quite heartbreaking. She didn't say this to Sue, but she said to Mike, she's so used to failure, she doesn't even feel bad about it anymore. On the one hand, it is good that Sue tries to not let these things bother her, but it is unfortunate that this does happen to Sue a lot. And Frankie is determined to turn things around for Sue just before the end of the term. And she goes to talk with a teacher and she manages to make a cross-country a no-cut sport, which means that she doesn't have to make the cut to get the team. She just has to show up. And Sue gets in a practice run and is hit by a deer And on several occasions, they made it very clear that she didn't hit a deer. She was hit by a deer. Which, to be fair, doesn't sound that impossible. Because I feel like, in my opinion, it's more likely that an animal is going to run into me than me running into it. But nevertheless, people are confused that she was hit by a deer. And the coach for cross country said, if you want to be on the team, you still have to be able to make it around the track 5 times. Sue's standing there with crutches because she hurt her foot when she was run into by a deer. And she does. She goes around the track. She goes around 4 times. That's when we begin that scene. And it starts to rain and she only has 1 more lap left. And everybody's there. Even Axel is cheering her on. And it was so beautiful. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. It's ridiculous. And then everybody else starts cheering on Barb. They think her name is Barb, but then very quickly they learn her name is Sue, and they're all chanting for Sue's name. And right before the finish line, she throws down her crutches and she falls to the ground, and there's mud everywhere, and it's so dramatic. And I imagine it would have been really unpleasant to film because it looks like a really uncomfortable situation. But the performance, Eden Sher's performance, is brilliant, and she makes it across this finish line. And she's so excited about this and everybody's cheering her, and then the coach throws her jersey, and that might be the first time Sue's ever been accepted. Actually, no, that's not true. There is another moment. I'll talk about that moment in a moment in a moment, just in case you're wondering what I'm talking about. But that moment of acceptance for Sue was so beautiful, so wonderful. I'm getting emotional. How ridiculous. It's an absolutely beautiful episode. Really interesting, uplifting, moving, evidently emotional, and I really rather enjoyed it. Definitely one that I think is worth watching again and again and again, and a solid end to season 1 of The Middle. I'll now mention the moment that I was thinking about before when Sue got accepted, and it's the episode where all of the football players are giving their jerseys to their mothers, and Axel gives his to a girl he likes, and Frankie's really annoyed because all of the other mothers got the jersey. And at the end of the episode, you might be seeing where this is going, but it's a previous episode, and Axel didn't give it to Frankie, he gave it to somebody else, and Frankie was momentarily about to get annoyed again, but then it was Sue. Axel gave Sue his jersey, and that's a really big token for Sue. A token of Axel's acceptance that actually he does love her. Obviously, he's her brother. He's supposed to love her, but I feel like that was an indication that he does love her, not just because he has to. And I thought that was really beautiful. Really thoroughly enjoyed rewatching season 1. Betty White was fantastic, and really looking forward to watching the next season again.